Good evening, people. Welcome. My name is Charles Ogletree. I'm the founder and the executive director of the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute. We sponsor a lot of programs. They are all free. They cost us money, but they're all free for you to come. And so we're accepting any donations, right, David? Anything that you want to give that will make that happen. This is a very special program, and it means a lot to us. We're going to have this as a reminder of what we need to do in the community, and we're going to have a discussion after it. I hope that people are able to stay for that time. Let me just say a quick word, and then I'm going to get on with the program. I think some people, but not everyone, knows about Charles Hamilton Houston and the person whose name became the name of this institute. He was an African-American male born in 1895 in Washington, D.C. He went to what was called the M Street High School and then went to Amherst College and then decided to enlist in the World War I. That tells you how long ago it was. And he was the mentor and trainer and the lawyer who taught Thurgood Marshall a lot about justice and race. And we are, in a sense, remembering him. I met his son and daughter. I've never had a chance to meet him. He was born in 1895, as I mentioned, but died in 1950 before the Brown decision was decided. If you look at all the cases in the 1920s and 30s and 40s and up until his death, he was instrumental, including in the Brown case in 1954. He was dead, but the lawyers who argued that case were deeply influenced by him. So we have a lot of events here as a reminder of what he was able to do, and we're trying to, in a sense, make people understand how important he was. And I think you'll be able to see that. We opened this institute about 10 years ago in October 2005, and it tells you a little history. I opened it, and David wasn't here, and Johanna wasn't here, and Ernest wasn't here, and Susan wasn't here. And Kelly wasn't here, all these folks who now are housing the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute here. But they've done an incredible job. 5 people who do the work of 50 people, organizing events, talking to young people, having mentors come, interns come to the program, and things like this. We're very glad that you're here. We hope that you'll have some thoughtful questions. We're open for any kind of discussion. I think that's very important. And I think you'll enjoy what we're about to show, but also enjoy the discussion as well. And I call him Dr. David. He is a PhD, unlike me, but a very smart guy and a very committed guy. And his career has been in public service. That's what he wants to do, and that's what he's done. And we are very happy to have him here at Harvard Law School and running the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute. He doesn't like the title. He's a managing director. That's a big job, right? But I haven't figured out what it is either. I know he's wondering what it means, but he's the man that makes it happen. Please welcome David Harris.
All right, boy. You the man.
Thank you, Professor. I don't know how many of you saw him on TV the other day when people kept calling him Professor, but I mean it with some affection. Well, welcome again, as Professor Ogletree said. Welcome to Harvard Law School on behalf of Dean Minow and all of us at the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute for Race and Justice. Today's event is possible through the aid of a number of organizations that have helped us to co-sponsor it, and I'm going to have to read them because there are so many. Witness to Innocence, many of you know that organization. The HLS Criminal Justice Institute. The HLS Criminal Justice Program of Study, Research, and Advocacy, the HLS Capital Punishment Clinic, the Prison Studies Project, the HDS, Harvard Divinity School Office of Ministry Studies, the Harvard Organization for Prison Education and Reform, and a special thanks to the Phillips Brooks House Association Prison Education Program and the Hutchins Center for African American Research, both of which contributed significantly to the cost of today's event. So we also owe a special thanks to the Equal Justice Society of San Francisco, which commissioned this work 3 years ago. And I first became aware of it and was determined that we would get this here at the law school to present it. And it's been a long road, but here we are. And for me, it's really an incredible and special circumstance. So a couple of words in addition to what Professor Ogletree said. We at the Houston Institute believe that we can and must find a way to change the way public policy is conceived and delivered, and do so in a way that's consistent with what we call community justice. And what we mean by that is public policy mechanisms that collect and amplify the voices of the people in communities that are affected by the policies that people pass. And I think the events of the last few months have shown us that there's a huge capacity in our communities to determine our own fates and influence policy. And today's event is part of that, but for all the talking and thinking and reading and writing that we do, we think artistic expression is one of the most powerful entryways to the fight for justice. And we are really, really pleased and happy that we're able to present this dance tonight. Now, you see behind me, we also, oops, it was gone. It's gone now. That's a magic trick. You did have on your seat some information that we hope you'll use and take advantage of, and take the reactions you have to what happens today to this dance and put them to use and become more and more involved. Following the performance, we will, as Professor Ogletree said, have a discussion. That discussion will include my dear friend and colleague, Diane Russ Tierney from the National Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty. And we look forward to her conversation with Joanna Hygood. Having said that, it is now my pleasure to introduce Joanna Hygood, the producer, director, choreographer, creator of this program, this dance, as well as the director of the Zacco Dance Theater. Joanna is a renowned artist whose works have been commissioned and performed around the world, and we are extremely glad, fortunate, and happy to have her with you, and I'm going to allow her now to introduce the dance. Joanna.
Here, am I on? No, it was so not met. There we go. Yeah, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much, David. This has been almost a Herculean effort to move this big set and to bring the dancers and to make this thing happen. But I know that it is well worth it, and we are very excited and honored to be here and to share this work with you. That said, we're looking forward to hearing from you at the end of the evening. Your feedback is really valuable to us. We're still forming and shaping and thinking, and I know that many of you are working in the justice system, so it would be helpful to have your feedback. So please do. And I don't know how much I want to say other than, Eva Patterson, as David said, is really an extraordinary person. I've been working with her now for about 5 years, and this process has been very powerful and transformative for all of us involved. And so I just want to share it with you. Now, this is kind of an intimate piece. I know that some of you were far away, and we did have a stage, but many things happened that I don't want to reveal right now. But we had to move the set forward and to lower it down and to make some adjustments. But for those of you who feel willing and able, this area here on the floor, I don't know who's coming to sit in these chairs, but the dancers. Okay, yes, dancers will be there, 4 of them. But then there's a few over here, and then there's some over here, if you would just like to get closer to things. So, so make a little rustle. Get yourself rearranged. Okay, thank you so much. Yes.
Anthony Graves. 4B 562.
Charles Welcher, number 447.
A. Cardell Haynes, 99330.
Terrence Williams, 423039. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die. 'Cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. town. Somebody keep telling me don't hang around. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. Then I go to my brother and I say, brother, help me please. But he winds up knocking me back down on my knees. Lord, there've been times that I thought I couldn't last for long, but now I think I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes it will.
I just wanted to mention the composer of this piece is the extraordinary Marcus Shelby, who is a jazz composer and musician based in the Bay Area. We had the privilege of working with him and creating this piece and doing it with his live orchestra. I also want to mention, they'll be out and I will introduce them directly, but the performers, Rashad Pridgeon, who's at the end, Travis Rowland, Matthew Wickett, and Antoine Hunter. So, thank you. So now we're gonna talk. We're gonna breathe. We're gonna
Well, it's hard to start after seeing something like that because I think I'm left speechless. But first of all, let me say how honored I am to be here and to be part of this program and to be working with the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute for Race and Justice and to meet Johanna and to see her beautiful work and the dancers. I'm the executive director of the National Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty, and one of the things that we've been doing is thinking about how we can really change the conversation around the death penalty. And we've seen a lot happening over these past several years, and this past year in particular, in Ferguson and around the country. And I had the opportunity to be at a panel last week at the Ford Foundation, sponsored with the Vera Institute, who looked at victimization of African American men. And I think we've talked about this issue in a number of different ways. But one of the things that came across in that discussion was the narrative that needs to change. The Vera Institute had done some research that found that despite the fact that African American men are the young men are most likely to be victimized, that there are very few, if any, services available. And that is because we don't see the victimization of African American men in the same way that we see victimization of other people. And one of the things that kept coming across in the panel discussion was that we have to change the narrative. There's this narrative that I guess is common as people, that we see others not like ourselves, that we don't have compassion for people that we see. We see ourselves as very separate, and so part of what we have to do as people is to realize that we are connected. But particularly when race enters into it, we really do buy into this idea that there's an other, that there's harm that happens to people that we can't feel compassion for. And I think that came through so beautifully in this piece, that there are people that are suffering. We don't know why they're there, but there's sort of an indifference to suffering and an acceptance that for some people that's the lot. And I think that when we start to address that problem, we start to recognize that we see people as other, that we don't have compassion, that we don't see the humanness in everybody, and particularly in African American men, that seems to unpack the whole challenge that we're seeing around the criminal justice system. We accept what goes on in our prisons because there's an other there. We don't see that they're suffering. And I think we accept, most recently, the fact that when we execute people, that there's going to be suffering, that there's going to be a lengthy process with regard to the execution because that person is an other. And so I think this piece has been so valuable as another illustration, because fundamentally, while we're trying to change public policy, we're ultimately trying to change the hearts and minds of our people. And I think the arts, in particular this piece, really gives us an opportunity to do that. So I'll stop talking and maybe answer some questions, but I do want to go back to a point that David said. You know, we wanted people to see this piece, we wanted people to experience it, we wanted people to be moved, but we need people to act. You know, these policies are in place because government, the policymakers believe that this is what we want. And if we're silent, that is assent. And so I think one of the things that can come out of this piece, if you're moved, that you will get engaged and you'll get involved and you'll help us change this.
Thank you.
Something I've been thinking about a lot lately is that there doesn't seem to be as much collaboration between social justice communities as there could be. As a member of the disability rights community, I was wondering how we might better help address these issues. Certainly in regards to able-bodied Black and blue or experiencing systemic injustice, but also in regard to particularly disabled people of color who are also at a disproportionate risk of ending up in a situation where they're less likely to be able to defend themselves.
I'm wondering if we could hold this answer and this discussion until Antoine comes down. One of the dancers is deaf, and so he has been very interested in this issue, and particularly around the deaf, community that are in prison. So I think it would be really great if he could participate and engage in this. Yeah. So hold that thought. Yeah. Yeah.
Could I interject a question?
Sure.
You could talk a little bit about kind of process of creating this piece, kind of what went on for you and what goes on for you even now as you see it again.
Yeah. Well, this is certainly an ongoing process. We started the research in 2010. We premiered the piece in 2011, and I'm continuing to work on it. But during that initial period, Marcus and I kind of put a list together of people that we really wanted to speak to, and Eva, helped facilitate that. She's very well connected and respected in the community, and so we spoke with Jeannie Woodford, who was the warden at San Quentin, and oversaw, I think, 4 or 5 executions. She then retired and then founded Death Penalty Focus and has really dedicated her life now to the abolition of the death penalty. So we spoke with her, and we spoke to Natasha Minsker at the ACLU, and a number of other people there. And we had the great honor to speak with Anthony Graves, who had been recently exonerated. He had been on death row for many years, 16 years, and been in prison for 18 years. And it was very fresh for him. It was really meaningful, transformative conversation and conversations. And a lot of the work that you see in the piece is kind of based on his memories and his experience in the piece. We also, Natasha sent us the execution manuals, and I mean, we read quite a bit and listened to a lot of interviews, and and videos, et cetera, in preparation of the creation process. Since then, we continue to work. We've, I've read, Michelle Alexander's book and, Brian Stevenson's. We continue to try to stay, to try to really stay informed. There's so much, obviously. There's things are changing, as you said, but the piece was really created for this type of context, as a way to support people who are working in the justice system and who are working with these issues, and to help, motivate people, because art has this really extraordinary way of touching in a very, very different way, an emotional and psychic way that other things can't. So it's a privilege to be part of this process of change.
I was struck by one thing. I think one of the things that's the biggest challenge for those of us working against the death penalty and for many people in the criminal justice reform system generally is that most people don't come in contact with the death penalty, and many people don't come in contact with the criminal justice system. And I think in this piece, people had an opportunity to actually see what day-to-day life is like in prison. And I think that, I'm struck by how well you captured that. And I think from the conversations, you really get a sense of the boredom, the idleness, the despair, the arbitrariness of not being able to get things as simple as a glass of water when you're cold or thirsty or hot. And I think that bringing that to people and having people understand that this is not sort of an exaggerated dramatization. This is what is going on. I think that does help to add some urgency to the work that many of us are doing. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So there was a moment in the piece where there was evoked for me a sort of hands up, don't shoot moment when, and I don't know if I am reading Ferguson into this or if that came from Ferguson, but it's hard not to, of course, make the connection, even though you've been working on this piece for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, was that evocate, could you speak to that a moment?
Yes, that was actually, there's a reference there, but the bigger reference is that Ferguson has been going on for many years. It's not just Ferguson, it's many, 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 many years. So I thought that it was important. Right now, it's a reference that people can grab and understand, but it's not necessarily a new one.
I believe one of the main problems is that if each individual person, even in this room, is not affected by a situation, they don't care until you're affected. I have recently, in the last 3 years, going on 4, been disabled. I was an able-bodied person, and being disabled is like being in prison, mm-hmm. and how people treat you. Mm-hmm. When people go to jail and they get the death penalty, people automatically assume they're wrong because the justice system put them in jail. But if you've noticed the recent surveys that have come out, especially on Ferguson, that how Black and brown people are targeted more so, and they're the ones that go to jail most of the time. And the death penalty, if you give someone the death penalty and you do execute them, what if they really didn't do it and the person that did comes forward after the person is already executed? It doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how we can do it, but people have to be aware and stop thinking about their own life and look at other people's situations. And just because something happened, I have people looking at me like I did something wrong to be in this chair. I did not. People that are in jail, they don't necessarily, every person that's in jail did not necessarily do something really bad or kill somebody. They're not crazy. However, if you don't have a good attorney, you're SOL, to put it bluntly. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you. May I introduce the performers? This is Travis Rowland. Rashad. This is Rashad Pridgeon. Antoine Hunter. And Matthew Wickett, who is hiding in the back. Antoine, someone brought up some of the issues that people with disabilities face in prison, and we wanted to maybe pick up on that conversation while you're here.
There's another situation where the protection for the people that's in prison, that's in prison, and for example, hearing aid, for some who are hard of hearing or that, some of them use the hearing aid to figure what's going on behind them, So if there's a criminal behind you coming, you can hear them, or thank you. Or for example, the glass has been taken away. Some experience for deaf people that go to prison, their hearing aid taken away, their glasses taken away. How they can communicate through the guard, through the police, through the lawyer, no sign language? No. Oftentimes they don't get an interpreter too. And so how can they say, oh, it wasn't me, and when they don't understand? When they don't understand you, they go, that was you. And it's a big issue happening all over the U.S., as far as I know right now. And also, it's like, for example, guards have full potential to make you look really, really bad. For example. And some of you go, oh, he did it. That was that person right there. That wasn't me. And the first year, and you're not saying it wasn't me, obviously it looked like you're guilty. You know what I mean? So we're trying to find different organizations that support disability, support deaf, to know their rights and put in different offices where it gives them the opportunity to be human in prison. So.
Did you want to speak? Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
what was this?
Thank you, Antoine. Thank you for contributing your perspective as a deaf person. One of the things that I've been noticing and thinking about a lot as a member of the disability advocacy community is I feel like there's this terrible dichotomy in our culture where disability has come to mean white person, and Black or person of color has often come to mean able-bodied Black or person of color. And I was wondering if we could get your thoughts on how we might change that disparity and how both the disability and the racial justice community could work together more on intersectional justice.
Well, I just recently, the president of the Bay Area Black Deaf Advocate, we faced a lot of politician issues like that. Those who are white, yes, they have privilege with disability. They give them their glasses back, for example. I'm just being easy, clear example. That's hard. It's a long fight. We're trying to start with the children to educate them, the community. Each community are responsible or liable to teach each other that your needs need to be met. And it's because it's not informed or educated. You know what I mean? If I don't know my right, you know what I mean? That. So, it's really a big struggle. Sometimes it's the educational level. Say, you have a right to say nothing, you know? And sometimes the cops say, you have to stay, you're guilty. No, educate, you have a right to say nothing until your lawyer comes. That's a big power there, you know? But many deaf and disabilities who are in the people of color community, they don't know like that. So funny, in California School for the Deaf and Framework, we educate some of them. We have more protests. Some of them can defend themselves more. Yeah, it's true. It's like they have privilege and it's down here. But it's also because of the education system, and it's also because of people of color who are now going back to the community and educate that. Like, for example, that's my responsibility to teach my community about that, as I'm doing it right now. But some people get scared, and it's hard because a lot of people don't want you to tell the truth. So it's hard.
Thank you.
Okay, wait, excuse me.
So you can tell me if I'm talking.
Okay.
My question goes back to the performance, and I just wanted to know if, Johanna, you can talk about some of the symbolism that you intentionally put in the performance that you wanted and hope that people will pick up on.
Okay.
I adjusted this.
Can you hear me? Yeah, is this good? There's a lot. If I was thinking about metaphors, the men who are constantly falling in, trying to push out, but they keep coming. It's like this endless stream of men falling into this situation. I use the house shape to think about how we reconcile this problem of our human need for home and this, home and comfort, sustenance, safety. Yet we're in a place that has completely destabilized that idea. Yes. Yes, it's very similar. And you see, men often, or people and women as well, who are in their cells, they often talk about being able to reach out and touch both sides. That's, it's easier if you ask me if there are some moments, but I think in this case, I couldn't control the sound, but often I can push up the volume, and you can't. I was in the back, so I don't know what your experience was really in the front, but you can't really hear them very well. And some people were saying, I couldn't hear them. The music was too loud. And I said, yeah, because you can't hear them. And these men are shouting. These people, men and women, they're shouting at the top of their lungs, really. And yet they're completely drowned out by whatever our day-to-day, this idea of other, the fact that we have basically assigned them that role or that experience and that permanence in that state. So that's something that is part of it as well. Yes? Did you?
The dance interprets their movements and their impressions of their movements, to hear them speak about how they're feeling or thinking as they did certain movements and what they actually represented.
Mm-hmm. who would like to speak? You haven't spoken.
How do we feel about the movements and the symbolism is what I'm hearing. Yeah?
And actually, what they actually symbolize.
Oh, for me personally.
Well, yeah.
Well, for some reason, I'm going back to a rehearsal we had where Joanna played all these interviews of wardens talking about.
It was the tie-down crew and the
Yeah.
execution team.
Yeah, and they were just going through the daily things that they did with prisoners to put them into execution on the gurney, how they felt about it, and it was very technical. But and the way the recording was for me, I hear things like dance, but it was just this. It was kind of like the image of us falling into the house in the recording. Like all of these different voices would just come in, and you'd hear a female talk about, I'd tie him down, and then at 8 o'clock we have to give him the injection, and then another man would talk about his feelings at 3 a.m. and that it's a very technical process in killing someone in the institution. That affected me really deeply, and just made me think about the process that a prisoner goes through, getting to that point, and the people that they come into contact with inside, and the moments before somebody dies, and all of the technical things that have to happen for that person to leave the earth and get injected.
And be killed.
So I play Anthony Graves in this piece, and he was convicted of killing a whole family, and he didn't do it. He was the cops had a lead, and he fit the lead, and they brought him in, and on the first day said that he killed this family and put him in prison, and he sat there for 18 years. A group investigated and figured out that he didn't do it, and he got out, and Joanna did a lot of work with Anthony, and she talked a lot about him with me, and she talked about how he was and is a gentle person, and going into prison, the song at the end, the Sam Cooke song, Born by the River, was the song that helped him stay intact and not go crazy. That was the song that kept him alive. And so I thought about that. So that symbolism for me throughout the whole piece is this idea that I didn't do something, and that eventually I know I'll get out. And even if I'm on my 24th year here, I'll hopefully, move out of these four walls. So
That song has a resonance to Change is Going to Come, and has, deep connections to the civil rights movement, and I think it's a perfect song for that context and for the larger implications of these issues.
I have two questions for you. One is, I'd love to know what your plan is for this piece. Where do you want to take it from here, and how do you envision continuing to use it? My second question is for you. You talked about wanting people to be engaged. Well, not everybody here is a lawyer, so I would love to know what kinds of things people have done that you have seen that are effective, and how you want people to be engaged a little more specifically.
Love to do it. The future of this piece is hopefully to be a part of convenings and gatherings like this, to be able to support people like this, to be part of the effort to help motivate and to be motivated for this change. yeah, I think that's really, that's it.
Well, Johanna and I just met, and I've got plans.
And we're doing some dance choreography together soon.
But even more than that. But I think in terms of what people can do, I think the first thing you need to know is you don't have to be a lawyer to do this. Lawyers have played a big role in fighting these cases. We sometimes use the word hand-to-hand combat, trying to save every life. But the real work, the way this is going to change is when people get involved. And right now, there's an active effort across the country to repeal the death penalty state by state. Most states that have the death penalty are currently in some kind of debate about whether we're going to retain the death penalty. In Kansas, there's a real chance of moving away from the death penalty. In Nebraska, in Delaware, in New Hampshire, there was so. So what we really need is people getting engaged. And even if you are not in a state that has the death penalty, you must know people in those states, and there are ways that you can support it. The biggest reason, as I said, that these policies remain is because policymakers are able to say the public supports this. And the public support for the death penalty and the public support for these prison conditions is what we like to say a mile wide and an inch deep. It's based on what people don't know. And so when people know what's going on, it doesn't sit well. And that's why we see this incredible, right now, change in the public's willingness to look at the whole issue of mass incarceration. We're seeing these left-right coalitions, and the same is true around death penalty. Our organization, the National Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty, launched a campaign that we called 90 Million Strong. And it's called 90 Million Strong because it stands for the number of Americans that we believe are opposed to the death penalty, but up to this point have been silent. And so our whole effort is to get engaged. We've partnered with the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute and 14 other national organizations. And so there was a slide up on the wall a little while ago. I think it'll go back up. The first thing you can do is go to the website, 90millionstrong.org, sign up. You can, we're doing all the modern things. You can follow me on Twitter, and we can get you engaged right away. We had a lobby day in Kansas, and we were getting people to get engaged. If you were moved by this piece, just doing a letter to the editor saying, I saw this piece, we have to be visible and vocal. And so we have ways of getting engaged. If you go to the website, if you follow me on Twitter, we will keep you busy as you want to be, and it doesn't take a lot. We just have to raise our visibility, and we just have to show that we're not in agreement with this. So I appreciate that question. We do have ways for you to get engaged.
We talked a little bit about this question of the intersectionality about the work related to ending mass incarceration and the abolition movement, and kind of ways in which we don't have a death penalty here in Massachusetts, although there's an attempt now to kill somebody. Can you talk a little bit about that work?
Absolutely. I mean, the key word here is connected. We're connected as human beings, and so what happens to people in prison is really, we are literally our brothers and sisters keepers. But it's also a connection between the kind of cruelty that we can countenance with regard to the death penalty and what happens to people in prisons. And one of the things that we're doing, again in partnership with the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute, is to try and look at ways that we can change the criminal justice system across the board. So we are looking for ways that when we talk about the death penalty, we do it in a way that lifts up some of these broader questions about mass incarceration. And we are partnering with other national organizations. I was very struck by your question about what we can do with the disability rights community. And we want to do more because, as you pointed out, that community is one of the most impacted communities. Today, even though juveniles cannot be subject to the death penalty, and people with intellectual disabilities cannot be subject to the death penalty, people who have serious mental illness can be executed, even though the reason that they committed the offense was the product of their disability, and people are not getting the services that they should be getting in prison. And so there's an opportunity for a real coalition around that. And so that's one of the things that we're doing. We're trying to pull together organizations that may not have criminal justice or death penalty as a main issue, but have civil rights and human rights as an issue, and again, forming a coalition around that. And so there's a real opportunity to do that. And so you can see both David and I about how to connect organizations.
Hi, I have a question. I work for an immigration organization, and one thing we know is that a lot of illegal immigrants are being detained, and unlike prisoners, they don't have rights to lawyers. So it is up to the judge to say whatever they want to say, and a lot of private prisons are being built to hold on to these. They call them detainees. So I just wanted to know, is there any work that you guys are doing in collaboration with the immigrant communities, especially they don't have lawyers and they have no one to represent them?
Well, as I said, I think that the key here, and it's not all built yet, but I think the key coming out of all of this is that there's a consistent set of concerns and values that we've got to come together with. And I think that we do need to build more. I think for a very long time, organizations like ours and many criminal justice or civil rights organizations tend to sort of work in their own lanes. And I think one of the things that we're seeing is that we can't do that anymore. And so we are looking to bring those folks into this effort. And I think that we can start by sort of recognizing that some of these commonalities, that you can't have a real commitment to justice if you're not committed to making sure that people have lawyers that are actually able to help them, and that that they have a way of understanding what's going on because they're people who speak their language. And so I think we're not there yet, but there's certainly a willingness to do that. And I'd love to talk to you afterwards about ways that we could do that. But I think the bottom line is we've got to build sort of a broad-based coalition of people who understand that there's some common values and that we have common destinies and we've got to work together. And I think when we do that, we'll be able to move forward. But it's not built yet, but that's exactly what needs to happen.
I have a question. Excuse me, does shows like the Diane Sawyer special that she did on 2020 last week regarding women in prison and that woman who is on death row and she asked for lethal injection, does those type of shows help with the death penalty, and would it be advantageous for your organization to have someone like Diane Sawyer or a popular news person do a program on the death penalty, and especially the proportionate number of blacks that are on it versus whites that are on it, and how it's affecting the community?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the reasons we're making the progress that we've seen, that this 90 million strong number, this 90 million number came from the fact that now 32 to 37% of the public opposes the death penalty. And I think that's because people are coming to see more of how it works. We had last year an incredible, I was struck by the part of the dance that was the execution. And a year ago, that wouldn't have been done that way because we had this myth that people were put to sleep. But now we know that people gasp for air for maybe up to 2 hours. And so we have a different view. And so the public getting a picture of what it really means to be executing people does change. So I think the more publicity we can get, the better. I also think that the woman that you're speaking about, the woman in Georgia, who is it in Maryland? No, there was a woman in Georgia who was scheduled to be executed, I think, last week. And the bizarre thing about this woman had actually been scheduled for execution on February 25th. They went up to the thing, and then they said, we're going to have bad weather, so they canceled her execution because of the weather. So they brought her back, and she was literally waiting to be executed. They brought her back this past week, up to the last moment. She was supposed to be executed at 7 o'clock, 11 o'clock. We're still checking our Twitter feeds and the online, and come to find out the prison officials looked at the drugs and decided they were cloudy. And again, because the public had been looking at this issue, they were like, they looked at something they probably wouldn't have looked at a year ago. So they said, well, maybe this will go badly. But the other thing that was important was there had been, she had a religious conversion, and she'd been studying, and so she had a base of religious people who were organizing and praying and vigiling, and they mastered the effort of getting 10,000 signatures. So they had a lot of people watching. I think the combination of the public being aware of these horrible botched executions, the fact that the public was watching, made them pause a little bit. I say they blinked. Now, we don't know whether these people are going to bring her back a third time to execute her, but that's how effective little things can be. Just signing a petition, just, seeing these online polls, all of that had an impact, as well as her lawyers bringing these cases up to the court. But this is how you have that impact.
The question, two-part. One is for the performers, but the energy in the room when the execution, it's show of hands, who felt that? I mean, it was so strong that I almost couldn't take photographs.
Mm-hmm.
So the first part of the question is to the dancers is, you are exerting a lot of energy on that structure, and to talk about how, does that affect you? Can you just do that and walk away? I just am curious about that. But thank you. It just was, that whole gasping for air, piggybacking on what you said, really brings, because I've been in a lethal injection room down in Angola before, so you see the table, but you don't really know, anyway. So,
Any of you want to speak?
It's always been really interesting to me in the conversations we've had with Joanna about how matter-of-fact and regimented and kind of sterile the whole operations is of the act of the death penalty. It's really interesting for me to go from being like this animalistic, swarming buzzard up around this like a monkey, orangutan animal creature, getting in fights and just very instinctual and impulsive and reactionary, to dropping into being with Matthew, acting upon Antoine for his lethal injection execution, to become then the institution itself, and to be very matter of fact. And it's, okay, this arm goes here, and we're gonna unbutton you this way, and this way. It goes off, we hand off it's very regimented and choreographed, and it has a system of steps to it, and then we pass off the clothing to then another person, and then each thing, it goes here, and then we strap him in, strap him in, strap him in, strap him in, and then lean him back, and it's choreography. It's a football play. It's a basketball play, and then he's swung around, he's put back up, and then the most powerful part to me is when we just back away and we're just looking at him, and it's deadpan, and it's expressionless, and we have to just be there to serve the function of the operations of killing someone in that those little sections of how we contribute to it. And in what Rashad was talking about, and in the discussions we've had with Joanna, and in the interviews that we have heard from wardens and people who participate in these acts, you go in there and you facilitate your part, and you walk away, and then you go home, you cook dinner for your family, and it's just really weird for me. So it's interesting to dive in from something so vigorous, and jumping off a thing and breathing and getting this huge fight with Matthew, and being all verbal, and we start off as gargoyles and like these 4-corner points, or hey, all this stuff, and then to just drop down into that is just really powerful for me as a performer. And then I would say probably the biggest part is when we're standing there at the very end after all those functions, and we just turn our head slowly and look away from him as he's speaking, as he's trying to get his point across, and Antoine has something to say, and we just turn, as we're facing him, we just turn our focus over here, shift our body's aim to match the focus, and we just walk away and leave him there to die. And it's disgusting and it's sickening, but it's a very powerful place to go as a performer. So I do enjoy the challenge of that, but it's really harsh material.
So the comment you just made about the orangutans and being like animals in prison reminds me of this article that it was in the New York Times about the Attica prison, and they had all these comments from the wardens and how brutal they were, and I think now they're being tried. It's been reported how brutal they were. But have you thought of showing this piece in prisons to try to get those wardens to de-otherize the prisoners?
Well, I've been recently approached by a group that's been doing theater in San Quentin. They have a very active theater program there, and many people who are serving life sentences participate in that program. And I've often thought about what it would be like to do this piece with them. And I'm just thinking about it now, and we've been discussing it a little bit, but yeah. Oh, Travis's father is in San Quentin currently.
On a life sentence plus an additional 13 years.
Yeah.
He's a deadbeat dad who'd never been in my life, and my mom was 15 and my dad was 20 when I was born. And just recently, this past, I just turned 36, and last month, and then when I was 35 and a half over this past summer, I got contacted by him. I was like, and so it's interesting that Joanna's been doing for years lots of work in places like San Quentin, and even with Wanda Sabir from the Bayview Reporter. My father apparently is involved in the arts and has written articles that have been published in the Bayview Reporter. And Zacco Dance Theater is based out of Bayview District in San Francisco, and I live there just 4 blocks away, so it's just really weird. So it'd be interesting to go perform there.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make you all turn this way.
And I'm going to interview you later about that perspective.
I just want to thank the dancers. That was unbelievable. It was so physically impressive. Thank you. I mean, the raw physicality, I guess it was between you and Matthew at one point. It was superlative. I don't know how you guys kept that up. That was phenomenal. And unfortunately, I'll never think of the song "It's Raining Men" the same way. I had a question for Johanna. Right before it goes into the sort of final piece with the Sam Cooke song, the 3 remaining gentlemen were walking in sort of asynchronous circles, and I was wondering if that was sort of because then you go into the Sam Cooke Change Is Gonna Come, if that was sort of the difference between the Amherst system and the Pennsylvania system of incarceration, and that this was a public policy choice that we made a long time ago to actually, to create this sort of panopticonish state that, incarceration is. And the other question I had was, who chose the names? And why, and what are their stories? I mean, we heard Anthony Graves, but I'd love to hear about Terrence Williams and the rest. So thank you. That was wonderful.
Mm-hmm. That wasn't my intention, but that's a brilliant idea. And I can see that why you would assume that.
Because
yeah.
then it was the first time that they were out and separate.
Yeah.
All 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
They've been in and out of the structure, but then at that point they were all 3 individualized within their own world, sort of a reflection on the depth, but also because of the disparate systems.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. I'm going to be thinking about that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I lost the second question.
The individuals of who we were.
Oh, yes. Here, we'll start over here.
Charlie Vetcher.
Do you want to say anything about him? This is actually his last statement. This is someone who was in prison in Texas. He always claimed his innocence to the very end. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anthony Graves, you know about?
My character is fictitious. I made my character up. His name is Terrence Williams, and he's got his number 423039. He is one of the individuals who was falsely convicted, but through the institution and by way of being there so long, has just become numb to the fight and to the struggle, and is just now come to a piece where this is his reality in his life, and so it's just, I wake up to this and I go to sleep to this, and I don't have a way out of this. My voice isn't heard, and I don't have the backing to support getting out of this, so this is what I have to find a peace with, for the most part. Yeah.
Here's Matthew. Matthew. Oh. Did he? want to speak about his character. Yeah.
So 2 things. One is about the jungle gym, which is what I kept, it was like so many things that became for me. But there was a playfulness too, which was very ironic and a little bit weird, and also beautiful, because they're dancers and because they'd be in poses or motions that were beautiful at the same time it was awful. So I thought that was really good because it evoked a lot of different emotions in me watching it, sort of liking it and feeling kind of awful about it at the same time. And then the other thing is the trappedness of the space. I wanted to say how effective that was. Back to San Quentin, probably the most impressive piece I've ever seen about prison was called The Cage, which I'm sure you all have heard about in California. It originated by people at San Quentin, and then they took it outside when cast by different people who were former prisoners. And the only other piece beside this that I felt had the absolute sense of people not being able to get out, even when they were all on the blue space. They couldn't leave the blue space, or there was a real sense of trapped. And I could feel that all throughout the whole thing, being pulled back there and not able to go. And for me, the most moving moment beside the actual execution was after it was over, when the 3 men, where there was a sense of the 3 men all moving around their own individual spaces. That was so lonely.
Yeah.
And I thought that was just exactly right emotionally. It was so, there weren't any words really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I wanted to make a comment and ask a question. Somebody, so just, I don't know how many of you realize, I think, when we did the Ferguson event, I made the point that there were executions scheduled on Martin Luther King's birthday. And, I think that was a profound fact that I think we as a society didn't realize. And I think that part of the challenge, Diane, is making those connections in a way that they would not dare schedule an execution on Martin Luther King's birthday ever again. We want them all over. But as a society, to be able to say, not on this day, I think that's really important.
I mean, there is this disconnect. I mean, part of what I want to say for people here is, now that you know, what are you going to do? Like, it's one thing not to know this is what's happening, but we do know it's happening now because we've seen it presented beautifully and powerfully here. And I think the point that David has been making all along is there is a connection. We can no longer say this is happening to somebody else. It has a connection. There are people who work in these prisons who are brutalized by the environment that they're working in, the people who strap people down and execute them and go home and cook dinner. That has an impact on the community. And when you talk to people who've been in those roles, executioners, it has an impact on their health, on their families, and their communities. And so we have to change it. It has an impact on the people who are going through this system. We haven't even talked about the impact on families, how families are torn asunder because of the system that we have, because not everybody is serving a life sentence. And people will come home having been brutalized and traumatized. And I think part of this challenge, that this narrative that I talked about earlier, is that we don't accept that the people who are going through this process are the same kind of human beings who can be traumatized. And where that's inappropriate. And I think that's the piece that we have to do. And I think it happens with people being visible. Everybody in this room, you came tonight because you care about these issues. We've got to make it more visible and more vocal. We've got to raise it with our friends. And the tools are here. There are tools that the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute have. There are tools that we have. We've got to make this part of the conversation. I've done this work for 30 years, and I'm just like everybody else. Somebody will go to a party, and they'll say, "What do you do?" And I go, "Oh, I work at the death penalty." Because I don't want to go through this conversation again. It's too hard sometimes. But it helps if more of us are talking about it. It's got to become part of the currency, and it's got to become part of the value system. And people, and it's got to be not okay to think what goes on in these prisons is okay. And I think that's really the challenge for us here tonight.
One thing I want to say with this, I learned so much with this, and I'm a very spiritual person as well. I learned and felt that, I mean, even though not everyone in prison is innocent, right? So I know you feel that, oh my God, the person killed 13 people, so, and maybe that people you may consider evil, that evil, and dark. You use that label. And it's like, okay, we need to remove that person off from the earth. I strongly believe that the dark or whatever it is has to go somewhere, you know? And so if you, that person, you know, maybe the evil villain, and you killed the villain, that energy moved to a new generation, you know, maybe even be more powerful. Growth, you know, or something boom to me, you know what I mean? And so I feel like if you keep that there alive, that energy stays, and it's slowly, and if possible, that is slowly transformed, slowly the light, and that, I'm sorry, I'm speaking very deaf right now, then something that's new, that's trying to get in, will slowly transform, maybe even dark, and we'll be able to have an opportunity to protect ourselves, to protect our community, you know? And so, that's why I really said, oh, we need to change that system, because we don't want that, something to destroy the earth, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? And so, yeah, does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
For the well, first and foremost, I appreciate this piece so much. Like, it brought me to tears. For the dancers, I wanted to know if, like, how did you guys feel before the piece about the death penalty and stuff?
I feel like I had only given it so much thought because up until finding out that my dad was on a life sentence almost a year ago, I just don't really have anyone in my life that keeps prison life and this kind of subject matter on my radar. But definitely began tapping into this subject matter with Joanna back in 2011 when we started working on this piece. And when we originally performed it, it was at Yoshi's Jazz Hall in San Francisco, and Anthony Graves was there. And we got to meet him and talk with him. And so since then, and in all the different reincarnations of it that we performed it at USF and at further social justice and performance studies departments, which are merged together. We performed at Laney College in Oakland for Black Choreographers Festival. We had a home season last year at Zocco Studios. And then just last night at UMass Amherst. I think with each time we put it back on its feet and we have more conversations and Joanna brings more information to the table and more statistics like all these other current folks who have the death penalty as their reality, it puts it more on our radar. So I think that it's definitely more on the forefront of my mind now after having given it thought and study and having, delved into it via the performing arts. So definitely a lot more now, but just because of who I was as a person and running around being an artist and working in the food and beverage industry, it just wasn't on my radar. But now it is a lot more. And so things like this are really purposeful for me.
I think about how the death penalty in prison has just pretty much shaped who I am as a black man, because I mean, prior to even thinking about this piece, I remember getting the video and watching the piece and saying to myself, I don't want to do that. And I think I even actually emailed Joanna.
You did.
And I said, I don't think I'm ready to be in this piece because I don't want to be anywhere close to that subject matter, that institution, that feeling. I'm trying to run away from that every day as a Black man. And so I digged into that for myself. Yeah, I'm really recalling the email that I sent saying that I didn't want to be in this. And I didn't, and I still don't. You know, it's hard. It's physically challenging. It's emotionally challenging. I hate putting on the orange suit.
Yes.
Yeah, and this whole piece, for me, how I rectify it is it's a chance for me to physically get in it and experience something that I haven't, and that I have been running away from and working all my life to not be in, and using my art and my mind to educate the other brothers around me to not be there. So this is another opportunity for me as a dancer to physically be in this place to say, no, you don't want to be here. And that I have to think about that every day. That this is not just something that as a performer I can do and then, you know, I go out and it's changed and it's different. It's like this all the time. And it's constant. There was somebody with me in the Bay Area who's just went to prison for something very minor. And I was trying my best before we did this performance to go see him, to just say hello and let him know that he's human and that I see him. And I visited my family, and there are folks that I didn't even know that are of my relation that are in prison. And so it doesn't go away. And I was thinking about it before I got into this piece, and I continue to think about it. And I'm hoping that this piece will, you know, continue to reflect to my brothers and sisters to stay away from this institution and figure out, you know, how we can free our bodies and minds from being there.
I'll just say that one of the things that we speak about in Circle before we begin the piece and before the performers go out is about really about the privilege that we have. And in some ways, we feel a responsibility to be able to speak for those who don't have access to you, to be able to speak on their behalf and to be able to tell their truth in public. And I think that that's what grounds us and why you keep coming back, because it feels right and it feels important to do that.
I felt very ignorant. To be really honest with you, I felt really ignorant. And I was just like, wow, to learn so much from this was so important. You know, it taught me how to be a researcher. It taught me how to be strictly honest, to be a man more today. It's, you know, and it makes me really scared for my people who are deaf and who are people of color, because oftentimes, just like I said earlier, we know nothing about this, and we have an opportunity to change it by voting, by getting the people in there. Oh, I didn't even know that. We can vote? Oh, I didn't know that. You know, and I feel like, wow, we're just letting our people get murdered, you know, or we're just letting our community going down, 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 rather than going up, 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 behind our back, or actually in front of our face. You know what I mean? And I identify in it. So it's like, this is really a blessing at the same time as when it's exhausting. you know, let me take the opportunity to say, because you are listening, if we feeling me, you know what I mean? Because this, it feels like every spirit that didn't want to die is calling to stay, don't take our lives, you know, in this way, unnaturally. You know, a lot of people want to have a natural birth. They want to leave the world natural, you know. And it was just stuff there to get really emotional for me. But, you know, I just hope that we can be able to educate this and be able to use dance as an easier way to express it, because I'm losing words, you know, this is the best. And everybody, I understand you, you know.
Last question.
So thank you all for your piece and the words that you've spoken tonight. My question is around, so we mentioned a little bit about Ferguson and what's been happening, that it's not recent, but it is in the news, that more people are aware of it. And so in the different types of things that have happened in this last year, these very public executions, right? Even this week in LA and Eric Garner and all of that, where the rhetoric that comes back from the police is that, oh, it's justified, they were a criminal. Have you seen, with all of that, this conversation coming together to help people realize that it's not two different components, as you were talking about connectedness, but it's all part of a larger counter narrative, to see how it's connected? And also, what would your challenge for any of you be to us to help to continue to make that counter narrative connected, given the public engagement that's happening around this topic?
First. Well, I think that it is just beginning to happen. I think in terms of that, people are just beginning to make the connection between sort of police abuse and the broader criminal justice system, and it's really up to us to make that connection. You know, ironically, it was a week after Ferguson, when the protests were still happening, there was an execution scheduled in Missouri of a man who was sentenced to death by an all-white jury. And there is a investigation going on at that very time about race and the relationship between that and death sentencing. And when we, along with 14 other organizations, appealed to the governor, their lawyers appealed to the governor, his lawyers appealed to the governor saying, don't let this execution go forward. We have reason to believe that race played a part in this. Look at what's happening in Ferguson. The governor denied the stay of execution. The man was executed, and he never even mentioned that this question was part of it. And so I think for advocates, we have to get out of our silos, because I can go to a criminal justice meeting and we can talk about a whole range of issues and we never mention the death penalty. Or I can go to a death penalty meeting and we can talk about a whole range of issues and we never mention the challenges of life without parole or a whole other set of things. And so I think the first thing for us to do is, as advocates, to start making those connections. And when we're in rooms with our colleagues, be thinking about how the policies that we're advocating can have an impact on what's going on. And I think part of what we've been working on with the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute is, how do we develop a common narrative about what we want? And a lot of it's about community justice. A lot of it's about a different vision about what kind of society we want to be. And I think it goes to some of the points that we've already been making. We want to be a society where people can be rehabilitated. That's our primary goal. Mm-hmm. We want to be a society where we focus on addressing the harms that victims encounter, and we deal with all victims. We don't have, second-class victims, and that's what we have right now. We have some people that we don't even see as victims. We want to be a society that looks at the root causes of violence and addresses those things. And so I think it's really, in our small circles, and as we talk about it publicly, as I said, people, we have opportunities in social media to raise these issues. You can blog about it. We just have to get this conversation started. But I think it is a challenge, because we're still, many of us, working in our silos, because that's the way we've been organized. But you have the brutality and cruelty of the death penalty. In some ways, it justifies all the other brutality that we've seen tonight in terms of what goes on in prisons every day. If we can tolerate the death penalty, why would we worry that a prisoner doesn't get medical help or that their hearing aids get taken away? I mean, because if you have to address that taste for and acceptance of brutality.
Thank you, Joanne, and thank you, everybody. I think let's have a round of applause for this. So, it's difficult to bring this to an end. I think we all have a kind of emotional connection to what happened tonight, and I hope we can hold that and use it. There's something about the arts that is designed to and does, in fact, connect with our human spirit and reminds us that spirit is alive in all of us, and we need to kind of do the work that's possible to make sure that everybody is able to realize that spirit. So there's some things up here on the screen. You can get involved. Next weekend, there's a very important meeting going on in Arlington. I encourage you all to try to get out to that or get out to something in some way and take what came from tonight and put it into practice. And again, I want to really thank the dancers, and thank you, Diane, and thank you, Joanna.
Thank you.
Make sure you thank Eva for me, too.
Okay. Yes, I will.
Thank you, everybody.
How many people are here?